The Dead Zone was the first Stephen King novel to take place in his reoccurring location of Castle Rock. The book was published in 1979. Producer Dino De Laurentiis acquired the film rights to the book and hired King to pen the screenplay. But director David Cronenberg rejected it. De Laurentiis then hired legendary director Andrzej Zulawski to pen the script, but it was too Andrzej Zulawski. After many drafts, the final product is a slow-burn, freaky Cronenberg horror movie. The movie follows a high school English teacher who, after a car accident, finds himself with psychic abilities. The movie stars Christopher Walken and Brooke Adams. Hey guys, welcome back to Garage Stephen-King-a-thon, where every day for the month of October, we revisit a Stephen King adaptation. Today, we're talking about the classic film, The Dead Zone. Now, this came out early on in the timeline of Stephen King adaptations. It came out after Carrie, The Shining, and all of those other ones, and I feel like this one gets a little overshadowed despite having the name David Cronenberg attached to it. Let's talk about David Cronenberg for a bit. We talked about David Cronenberg in our last marathon, which was Zombie-thon. We talked about the zombie movie Rabid, and I'm glad to say that he's also present in this movie marathon where he directs The Dead Zone. David Cronenberg, Canadian filmmaker, classic Canadian filmmaker, horror filmmaker, makes really weird, creepy, psychological horror. And he's most known for his use of body horror with movies like The Fly and Scanners, but this isn't a typical Cronenberg movie. This is more of a slow burn suspense movie. Even compared to Rabid, which we talked about last year during Zombie-thon, this is a much more tame film. Now that's not to say there's not some elements of gore in this. There are, but they're used extremely sparingly, and when it does, it's truly terrifying. Now, the structure of this movie is a little different from the structure of the book, from what I understand. When King wrote the book, all of the sequences and all of the events kind of happen in parallel. But when Cronenberg directed the movie, he wanted it to feel more episodic. He wanted it to feel like almost like a TV show where you just pick up with this character at different spots in his life. So that's what the misunderstanding was when King penned the screenplay and Cronenberg rejected it. You can kind of divide this movie into thirds. There's the first third where he discovers his psychic abilities. Then there's the second third where he uses his powers to solve a crime. Then there's the final third in which he's trying to retire from being a psychic. And then he has one last mission, which is to kill a senator. Let's talk about the thirds one by one. So in that first third, you're kind of introduced to the mood of the film. It's a very Cronenberg film in the sense that it's a very cold film. It feels very Canadian. Cronenberg is a Canadian director. This film was set in Toronto. While the movie does take place, I presume, in Maine, but it's a fictional town in Maine called Castle Rock. It feels very Canadian. The colors are very muted. It feels like cold winter. You can really tell these actors are out in the cold. You see the fog in their breath, and everything feels so desaturated and gloomy. That's what I like about Cronenberg's style. You can tell this kid grew up in Canada. When Christopher Walken's character, John, which, by the way, his character in the film is called John Smith, which is kind of annoying. It's like the most generic name ever. But apparently in the book, Stephen King mentions that he has a very cliche name, but in the movie they don't, so it kind of just feels weird. But anyway, the first time John Smith gets an episode of his psychic abilities, I love the editing there. It cuts between him in bed at the scene of the crime versus him in bed in the hospital, and it goes back and forth really quickly, and he's confused, and that editing just adds to the confusion of the character. This is also a very subtle movie. In a time where I feel movies lack subtlety, this movie uses camera tricks to deliver the point of a scene. For example, one scene that I like is a scene where John Smith's mother is in a hospital bed and she's about to die, and John Smith grabs her hand and reads her mind and then starts crying. The director doesn't tell you the character died. You can just assume just from that one gesture. And the camera doesn't even linger on that gesture for all too long. It's done very subtly, very directly. Really goes to show how good of a visual medium cinema is. Then we jump into that second part where I talked about. The second part is him trying to solve that crime. And I was really on the edge of my seat when I said at the beginning that the use of gore is done sparingly in this film. This is one part where it was done very well. He finds the murderer, who turns out to be a crooked cop. And the crooked cop takes a pair of scissors and places it in a table, then goes to jam his head against the table, having his mouth wide open, ready for that blade to penetrate his spinal cord. And when he's laying there, almost dead, he's just jittering like a fish out of water. That's what I mean. This movie isn't super gory per se, but it's the realism to it that adds to the freakiness. Then we jump into that third part where John Smith discovers that his powers are having a physical toll on his body, and that the more he uses it, the more likely he is to become weak and die. But there's this crooked senator played by Martin Sheen, and Martin Sheen is so hammy in this movie. He's chewing up the scenery, doing the biggest faux politician impression you can do. I loved Martin Sheen in this movie. So Christopher Walken shakes this guy's hand. He sees a vision that he's going to cause a big nuclear war. He's going to kill thousands of people. And then he has this conversation with his doctor. If you had the ability to kill Hitler, would you kill Hitler? And it causes this great debate, and he ultimately chooses to go down the route of killing Hitler. So he goes to this church, he's there with his rifle, and he goes to shoot Martin Sheen. And he misses his shot, unfortunately. But Martin Sheen grabs a baby and uses the baby to shield himself. And then a photographer takes a picture of that. And that basically destroys Martin Sheen's political career. As Christopher Walken's character lays there dying with a gunshot wound, Martin Sheen goes to him. Christopher Walken grabs his hand and sees Martin Sheen's future, where he becomes depressed and alcoholic, and he ultimately commits suicide. So, although Christopher Walken wasn't able to kill Martin Sheen, he did, in fact, change the future. I thought that was a beautiful subversion, and I was really like, oh, fuck all that for nothing. And then, boom, that happened, and I was like, oh, shit! Oh, shit! I want to talk about Christopher Walken's performance in this movie. I think this is probably Christopher Walken's best performance, alongside The Deer Hunter. I like him in The Deer Hunter, but this is a more subdued performance. It's really, you can really tell just by his face the mental struggle that comes with having this psychic ability. Kind of reminded me of a movie like Unbreakable, where in Unbreakable he's carrying the weight of everyone on his shoulders, because Bruce Willis in that movie can see visions of crimes that people did in the past, and he has to carry that weight on him. Christopher Walken in this movie has a similar thing going on, where he can instantly tell how people are going to die, what their outcome is going to be in the future, and it really takes a toll on his mental health. There's even that great scene where a cop goes to him asking him to solve that mystery, and he says,
Not a religious man myself, I'm sorry to say. But I will say this. If God has seen fit to bless you with this gift, you should use it.
And he's like, this isn't a gift, this is a curse. I've been in a coma for 5 years. I watched the love of my life marry someone else and have a kid with someone else. And you can tell he's definitely got a mental struggle happening here. Christopher Walken, perfect casting in this movie. Guys, here's my Christopher Walken impression. Are you ready? Lion, lemon, lion, lemon. All right, let's go. You know, I had this watch in my ass for 10 years. Oh, that was awful. That was awful, ladies and gentlemen. Please don't ever let me do another Christopher Walken impression. That was truly terrible. So yeah, basically Cronenberg. Cronenberg is a little hit and miss with me, to be honest. I loved Rabid when I watched it. I loved The Fly, obviously. The Fly is everyone's go-to. In more recent years, I liked his movie Map to the Stars. I thought that one was interesting. But then he does other movies that I'm not too much a fan of. Contrary to everyone else, I'm actually not a fan of A History of Violence. Contrary to everyone else as well, I don't like Dead Ringers. I don't get Dead Ringers. I tried watching it twice and it just never hit with me. And then there's other movies he's done in recent years, like Cosmopolis and whatever that was called, Cosmopolitan. The one with Robert Pattinson where he gets a haircut, and that was the movie, he got a haircut. Yeah, he's hit and miss, but that shows the true sign of an artistic director. If a director's hit ratio is 100%, then that director is truly not challenging himself. That's how I feel anyway. People get mad because sometimes a director in his filmography is going to have 2-3 bad movies. I don't care, because the director is taking risks, and sometimes you take a risk and it doesn't pay off. But then when you do take a risk and it does pay off, then it's fantastic, okay? Look at Scorsese's filmography. That's the prime example of someone who takes risks. Now, he's gonna do stuff like Age of Innocence and Bringing Out the Dead, which didn't connect with audiences as much. But then he takes risks and he makes something like Hugo. And Hugo's amazing. So that's what happens when you take risks, and I don't fault Cronenberg for having a few films in his filmography that don't really connect with me. I can say the same thing about David Lynch. David Lynch does many movies, and some of them don't connect with me, but then movies like Eraserhead and Elephant Man and Straight Story and Mulholland Drive, those connect with me, so it is what it is. Ultimately, I think this is one of the most unnoticed Stephen King adaptations out there. People like to talk about the early Stephen King movies. They talk about Carrie and The Shining and other movies like that, and this one kind of falls to the wayside, despite having an equally, maybe not equally, but still a very talented director attached to this. Guys, this is a very slow burn movie. It's not the kind of movie that you like pop in to get some gruesome kills. This is a slow burn mystery movie and a very psychological drama. If that sounds interesting to you, I suggest you watch The Dead Zone, which, by the way, they don't explain what the dead zone is in this movie. The dead zone refers to the portion of your brain that's not being used. It's like that old myth where they say you only use 10% of your brain's capacity, and the 90% just lays dormant, which isn't true and is in fact, oh, malarkey. But anyway, that's what the dead zone refers to. Guys, have you seen the dead zone? What did you think of it? And let me know. Also, there's a TV series about the dead zone. Let me know if you watched that. But that will be it for me. I'll see you guys tomorrow, where I'll review the next Stephen King movie.